What is up, everyone? We are back with week 2 of the Fantasy Alpha radio show. Thank you for joining us again this week. Thank you for listening in to hear our weekly picks, our fantasy analysis, talking about injuries, the latest news in the NFL. I'm very excited to start off this week. There's a lot to talk about, and yeah, my fantasy team in one of my leagues is not doing very well right now. I'm currently 0-4 because we use the median. So if we don't hit the median, it's a loss for ourselves. And yeah, it's a unique way of playing, but if you use the sleeper app, you could really change some settings in there, spice up the league. But I'm wondering, how are you guys doing so far 2 weeks into the season?
I may have already hit an all-time low, boys. So my
boy.
situation is I lost. That's bad enough as it is. But 2 running backs. I got Mr. Chubb, who decided his leg was going to split into 18 pieces last night, courtesy of Minkah Fitzpatrick. So he's done for the year. That goes running back number 1. Running back number 2, the LA Rams failed to tell me 5 minutes before the game that Cam Akers is a healthy scratch because they're thinking of trading him, which there was no talk of it all week. And all of a sudden, he's inactive. So I lost both my running backs, and I'm just going to cheer you guys on the rest of the season because I think my team's toast already.
That sounds good, Alex. You can be a fan of my team anytime, man.
Oh,
Yeah, my team, we did all right. We had a rough loss this week. It was a tight one. Very close matchup. My boy Daniel Jones decided to put up this week. But it was tough to go against Devontae Smith, Tyler Lockett, some tough wide receivers that put up more points than my guys. Still waiting for Joe Mixon to put up some more points. I mean, everybody's waiting for the Bengals to do something.
Sounds like excuses.
Yeah. No, it's just facts. Yeah, James Cook has been the hype of my season so far. He was kind of my late round grab, and he had a great week last week. So yeah, looking for more output from the team. But 1-1, we're all right. We're sticking there. We're still ahead of Alex, so that's really all that matters.
I had a big week 2 win over here. After losing week 1, my dude Jalen Hurts decided to step it up. Steelers defense went ahead and got me 26 points. So that was huge. Surprisingly, I won, but I do have Nick Chubb as my running back as well. My backup is Aaron Jones, who's also got hurt, is inactive this week. So
that sounds like that's good coaching, JB. Alex, he has Nick Chubb on his team, but had no fill-in for him, obviously.
I mean, like I'll see who I can pick up. Obviously, my league's a 6-person league, so there's still some running backs like Kakio or the Chiefs running back. Najee Harris is still available, but I don't see the Steelers can get their running game together. Could pick him up. Dom, you made a face like you think Najee Harris is gonna turn it up.
No, I'm just shocked that he's still on the waiver in your league, but I guess it makes sense for a 6
Yeah, it's a 6-person league, and a lot of people that hate the Steelers besides me.
So. Yeah, speaking of the Steelers, I was there at the game Monday night, and yeah, fans were not too happy with our offense. There was actually a very loud chant to say, like, get rid of Canada, like, fire Canada. It was crazy.
There was a chant?
Yeah, I don't know if the people on TV could pick it up, but the crowd was chanting, fire Canada, fire Canada.
Those are some good people.
Yeah, that's smart people right there.
Some very good people.
That's what I'm thinking too.
Dang, that's bad though. Wow, I didn't know that.
But yeah, that Nick Chubb injury, seeing that live, I watched my fantasy season die on the field. I also have him in my league, Alex and JB. And my second running back would be Jonathan Taylor. So as you can tell, it's not too well for me as of right now. But I guess just to, go off that Steelers and Browns game, there's a lot of fantasy impact to kind of talk about and go over. just from what we've seen on both sides of the field, both for the Browns, both for the Steelers. This Steelers offense is looking pretty anemic right now. In the fourth quarter, I think we had -7 yards. And by the grace of God, TJ Watt, carries our franchise on his shoulders, as he has the past few years.
Yeah.
And seeing that live was pretty sick, but I don't think it's a win to celebrate per se. If you have any Steelers players on your roster or anything like that. But kind of going off that Nick Chubb injury, Jerome Ford, they kind of just plugged him into their offense. And he had, I think, about 120 yards, first start of the year. That's pretty good. And he's available in 9% of leagues right now. So I assume that's going to shoot up to probably 80% or more by week 3. George Pickens, he went off this week. So
I got him.
You have him?
Yeah, I got him. I'm so happy.
Yeah, what did you think about what you saw from him this week, JB?
I mean, like, he got a lot more targets, which is promising, Obviously, I didn't think much about the offense at all, but George Pickens has speed that I didn't know he had, which I think is going to be really good. He got me like 19 points, which was huge. But I'm like, I don't know. We got to see what happens with the Steelers offense, but I'm going to keep him as my starting wide receiver for now.
With Deontay Johnson out, he needs to get way more targets than he is.
Right? Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, I think we could definitely see George Pickens ascend to that wide receiver 1 role by the end of the year, even when Deontay comes back. I kind of see on his face that he's demanding the ball more, and he had that huge touchdown play yesterday. So I think fantasy fans are definitely happy with George, but I want to know if you guys are out on Kenny Pickett. That's what I want to know. Because I heard some disgruntled fans live in the stadium.
Yeah, for me,
go ahead, Jack.
He's got a lot to still prove. There's still some throws that were like yards behind guys. Definitely showed some. I mean, that first interception was quick, and that was yards behind the guy. He just doesn't look as confident as he was in preseason. Obviously, everybody's confident in preseason. And yeah, every announcer keeps talking about how great they were in preseason, but we're done with the preseason. Yeah, we went undefeated in the preseason. Nobody cares. We're in the regular season. But yeah, you mentioned just a couple guys that, were kind of studs this week with Chubb's going out. Jerome Ford stepped up. My big stuff for this week was Keenan Allen. Like there's a couple wide receivers that went off this week. Keenan Allen was one of them. Him and Justin Herbert still having that connection. He had like close to 30 points, I think, this week. 14 catches, 187 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He might be a guy you want to target in your league. I think trade talks we'll get into later, but he was one. So that leaves kind of Mike Williams as a second receiver. But he's kind of my go-to sleeper guy. I have him on my bench, and I'm hoping that he's going to put out this week. But yeah, what other guys do you think were studs this week besides our favorite home team, Steelers?
I would say. Oh, sorry.
Go for it, Dom. Go for it.
So this is kind of off the wall, but I keep an eye on tight ends, right? So I have TJ Hawkinson in one of my leagues, and he absolutely went off in the Vikings game. 2 touchdowns. I think he had 10 targets total, and I think he was a stud. I mean, if you're getting 26 points from your tight end, that could be a huge indicator that you're going to win that week, just because there's such a variability between how many points tight ends score. And I think if your tight end could score more than 20 points a week, that's a really good indicator that you're going to make the playoffs. So for me, my stud was a tight end, and it's definitely TJ. Another stud I had, I know I kind of bash on older wide receivers as we were talking about last week, but Mike Evans still tends to be old reliable, man. Like, this is like 10 years and he's still putting up massive numbers. He's probably going to get 1,000 yards again this year. And he seems to be Baker Mayfield's number one target. So I think if you drafted Mike Evans probably in the 5th or 6th round, just because he kind of fell off, like in the rankings, he fell a little bit. I think you're pretty happy because he's sitting at wide receiver number 4 heading into week 3 in the rankings, just based off his points per game. So those are my 2 studs of the week. I'm surprised with Baker Mayfield's play. I wasn't sure if he'd be able to, prop Mike Evans up to the usual standard we expect from him, but it seems like they have a really good connection so far, and I think that's going to continue throughout this year. JB, do you have any studs that you liked this week?
Yeah, I played against one. I still ended up winning, but Geno Smith went off. He didn't throw any interceptions, which he never does, and he did really good. He looked really good inside the pocket, and they beat the Lions, which I had the Lions winning, so proved me wrong. And one of my, I think, is, as I said last week, is going to be the best running back this season, Christian McCaffrey. He just continues to play well. I think he's going to carry that team a lot on his back. So those are some studs that I noticed this week. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey's a known one, but Geno Smith, I honestly was losing hope in him, so I'm surprised. I was surprised to see him do that.
Yeah, so I got 2. Both of them I would I guess consider them both wide receiver 2 for their respective teams. They could all kind of be like a 1A, 1B, but I think that their productivity is a reflection on the fact that they have someone else on the other side of the field that needs to get a ton of respect as well, so they can't get double covered at all, which really benefits both. So first one I got is Devontae Smith, obviously paired up with A.J. Brown. Devontae Smith had a huge game, 131 yards and a touchdown, especially the fact that A.J. Brown didn't have a good game. He had 4 catches, 29 yards, whatnot. He was whining on the bench of Jalen Hurts, even though they were winning. The fact that if Brown's getting the respect that he's getting as top wide receiver, Devontae Smith is going to have single coverage all the time, and he's going to win that battle more times than not. The second one, maybe a little more under the radar, Christian Kirk out of Jacksonville. Even though they lost, they only put up 9 points. He himself had 11 catches, 110 yards, and he had, I think, like 14 targets, something like that. The fact that Calvin Ridley is now with them takes a lot of attention off of Kirk, because Kirk was kind of the wide receiver 1 last year for them, I would say. Now that Ridley's there, that's going to open up the playbook a lot for him. And this kind of shows even Kansas City's defense isn't too bad. Anytime you can get 10 receptions out of someone and have a really good quarterback, Lawrence, I consider that to be pretty successful. So I got Kirk and Smith as my studs this week.
Kirk's finally filling out his contract. They paid him so much. So
yeah. I feel like mentioning that when you're paid a big contract like that, I feel like the coaches are kind of pressured to, use that money wisely, because, just like TJ Hawkinson, he's the highest paid tight end in the league this year. And I think that'll really benefit him, especially in that offense, because Justin Jefferson will probably be double teamed a lot. Jordan Addison will probably get the second best corner or defensive player on him. So that leaves Kirk to dump it off to TJ, especially in the end zone. So that's definitely kind of relating to why I thought TJ is going to make a big impact this year. But on the flip end, I think there's also a lot of studs that we want to talk about this week. Or not studs, duds, my bad. And to start off, my dud is Kyle Pitts. I feel like the hype train has been surrounding him for about two and a half years at this point, ever since he's been in the league. And he is just not delivering even now in year 3. He's scoring less than 10 points per game. And I think a lot of people expected him to kind of elevate his game this year and lead that offense in targets.
Are you one of those people that expected that?
I am. I do have him in one of my leagues. And I'm about ready to not drop him completely, but definitely I'm benching him and picking up someone like Zach Ertz or something like that. It's just not looking good for Kyle Pitts owners if you're invested into that player. Hopefully that turns around this year, but I think the Falcons' offense isn't that explosive in the pass game. So I don't know if we could really be expecting a lot from Kyle Pitts in week 3 or more, or moving forward.
Yeah, I feel like it's big to point out those 0-2 teams, and if it's time to start freaking out or not. 2 of my duds are on the same team. I love seeing the Cincinnati Bengals do bad. But Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, Jamar Chase was the top 5 pick in a lot of leagues. And he hasn't been putting up numbers that he usually puts up. Joe Burrow, obviously when your quarterback isn't playing well, your wide receivers aren't playing well. So Jamar Chase is my dud for the week. Also Joe Burrow. That guy needs to figure his stuff out. But yeah, I think there's a lot of improvement that needs to happen there. A lot of finding yourself again, looking in the mirror. But I think Jamar Chase is the bigger one. More was expected of him. And they're just not throwing the ball as much as they should be.
My dud of the week is DeAndre Hopkins. So through both games, he hasn't eclipsed 70 yards receiving. Last game, 4 catches, 40 yards. If you're going to be wide receiver 1, that probably isn't acceptable. And for someone who claims that they still got and they can still be wide receiver 1 on a team that is really depleted on wide receivers as it is, it's been very disappointing so far for fantasy owners. And I think also the fact I don't trust Tannehill at this point. I feel like he really reached his ceiling a couple years ago of what he can be. So in order for Hopkins to produce, I can't imagine Tannehill gets much better as well. So I'm pretty low on Hopkins right now as a starting wide receiver on fantasy teams.
I guess my dud, my starting tight end, Dallas Goedert, he had 0 points first week, 2 points this week. I think it's my fault. I shouldn't have picked a tight end off a team with so many weapons. They just has a lot of people for Jalen to throw the ball to. But I'm gonna keep riding him. I think he's one of the best tight ends in the league. He's just not getting many targets. Not like he's dropping the ball or something. It's just not coming his way. So we'll see if he can do a little bit more than just that, because I'm going to need him to win some of these games here coming up. So
I think it's worth a shot to take a look at that waiver wire, JB.
Yeah, it definitely is worth a shot. So
anything's better than averaging 1 point.
Yeah. Anybody's better than averaging 1 point, honestly. So I think I'm probably gonna take a look at that.
Yeah, I would say, Jack, going off of what you said, I think probably the biggest shock this year is Joe Burrow's gameplay, as well as Jamar Chase's. They are just not delivering thus far. And looking ahead to week 3, I don't know if they're gonna win week 3 because Joe Burrow's health is in question. And I honestly wonder if, moving forward into this season, if his injury preseason is going to keep nagging him throughout the year. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if we should all tamper our expectations regarding the Bengals. But I think Jamar Chase might be an interesting trade target right now if you expect the Bengals kind of to rebound and make a little bit of a comeback. But I think it all depends on Joe Burrow's health and if that really starts to descend as we go on, because I think right now he's questionable for week 3 versus the Rams.
Yeah.
And I think there's a very good chance that the Bengals could start off 0-3 just because the Rams are really explosive right now. So I thought that was a great point you brought up, Jack.
Yeah, one of my leagues, he's my starter. I grabbed him early. Quarterbacks were going fast, which, as fantasy people know, once people start grabbing quarterbacks, they go very quickly. So I jumped on him pretty fast, was confident, didn't feel like the injury was going to be much in the preseason. Luckily, though, I got big old Russell Wilson, let him cook on my bench. Chilling there. He had a great game this past week. It was great seeing him with the long ball. That game was unbelievable.
That was wild.
Wild game, that Hail Mary at the end to send it to overtime. So I always try to stuff at least an extra QB in my on my bench just in case your number one doesn't pan out. So Russell Wilson was a guy that I'm probably looking to start this week. I know I forget who the Broncos are playing this week, but I know the Bengals are home against the Rams. Definitely going to keep an eye on Joe Burrow's health. But having Russ in my back pocket, hopefully they'll let him cook this week. Broncos country, let's ride.
That Broncos game didn't end up going to OT, did it?
Oh, I don't know. I just saw it.
Yeah, they missed the 2-point conversion on a not called pass interference.
I gotcha.
I mean, Sean Payton has to be sick to his stomach at this point. He's probably thinking, like, why did I get involved with this? Like, 0-2, possibly going 0-3. Just to wrap up the talk about the Broncos right now, it's just like you expect more from Sean Payton, like an all-time head coach, with pairing with Russell Wilson. Maybe they turn it around looking forward, but as a whole, the Broncos are a rough team to root for fantasy-wise right now.
Well, and you hold your breath, too, with Javonte Williams, who's coming off of an ACL reconstruction. And then you're already down Tim Patrick, who's one of your best weapons. So you're really looking, whoever has Cortland Sutton, they're looking for him to be putting up big numbers because he's like their primary target. And Judy's so hit and miss. Judy is always, since he's been in the league, he's been hot 1 week and then three weeks of being a dud. So you can't rely on him as much. You really got to look at Cortland Sutton as being your primary target in that offense.
Oof.
Rough.
It is rough. But now that we talked about our duds for last week, I think it would be great to mention a lot of people who are available on the waiver wires right now, maybe to fill in for these duds that we talked about. So, Jack, do you want to start off with mentioning any waiver wire pickups you think that would be good?
I also am in 2 leagues, and I did have Mr. Cam Akers, who was a healthy scratch, which, ruined my week this week.
Inefficient news given to these fantasy owners.
Seriously, that is kind of ridiculous, and I hope that the NFL cleans it up.
But
his backup, Kyren Williams, he showed up last week. He was I think 60% of he's rostered in 60% of leagues on Sleeper. I think I saw that earlier. So he's kind of a guy I'm targeting this week. Jerome Ford, like we talked about with the Browns. Those are kind of my two running backs to look at. Who else? Zach Moss. Me and Alex were talking about trades earlier today, and I kind of mentioned that one to him. So, Alex, if you have any trade suggestions, now's
it's enticing. You wanted Justin Herbert from me, and you already see my team is so depleted, and that I don't have a backup quarterback.
He's far too handsome for your team.
On live stream right now,
far too handsome.
Reject that offer.
Yeah, he's far too handsome for your team. But Zach Moss, he showed up for the Colts. The Colts seem to figure stuff out. It's a bummer their QB1 went out. Concussion. Not really sure what came out of that. So definitely when he's in the game, Zach Moss won't be getting as many looks just because Richardson likes to run the ball a lot. So that's a thing to keep an eye out on. So I like Zach Moss. I like running backs this week. Everybody's looking for some. There's injuries everywhere in the running back position. So I got Jerome Ford, Kyren Williams, and Mr. Zach Moss.
So I got a running back and wide receiver. Running back wise, I'm looking at New York Giants and Matt Breida. Now that Saquon's out for a little bit of time, it's kind of I know they said it's kind of like indefinite, but Matt Breed, I was kind of looking up in major PPR leagues. He's projected to have more than 10 points. I guess a lot of news around the camp right now is that he's getting a lot of touches in practice and that he's probably going to be getting a lot of snaps coming up. And in the past, he's been one of those who's good at catching out of the backfield too. So look for him to probably make a little bit of an impact if you're looking for a depleted roster running back and need someone desperately. And another one, maybe might be more for those 8 and 10 team leagues. This might be on the fence, but definitely like 12 and 14 team leagues definitely have this guy on his roster. But Sky Moore out of Kansas City, he had 17 fantasy points this week. He stepped up pretty big for Kansas City, and I feel like he's gonna have a bigger impact now and see if he can kind of come out as wide receiver 1. We don't really know how long Kelsey's going to be able to hold up with the injury he has, and Mahomes is going to need another target. And if Sky Moore can keep ascending like he has these first 2 weeks, he could be a good pickup, especially in some of those like 8 and 10 team leagues if nobody has him.
I guess for waiver wire, I'm looking at running back, obviously, since Nick Chubb's out. I'm a big Steelers fan, so I'm really thinking maybe Najee Harris, but since he's still available. But I really think that Jaylen Warren at some point is going to end up taking Najee Harris's spot. Okay, this is just my opinion, but I really think Jaylen Warren's a better running back. He hits the hole harder. I think he's just better all around. So I really might end up picking him up, taking a chance here. So, and then if Najee doesn't get picked up down the road, then go ahead and grab him, see what Jaylen Warren can do. Obviously, I'm probably going to get a new tight end since Goddard isn't doing anything for me. I saw Dawson Knox was available in my league. So he got a touchdown last week, put up decent numbers. So I might pick up Dawson Knox or maybe try out Kyle Pitts, like Dom was over there talking about. See what he's about. Maybe he'll turn it around. We'll see. But yeah, I think that's probably what I'm looking at. I don't know if any of our viewers are in a 6-person league, but if you are, then that's what I'm going after.
Yeah, kind of going off what you said, JB, I have 2 players as well, and one of them is Jaylen Warren. I think that passing-wise, he will be very impactful this year just because, our offensive head coach loves, to dink and dunk it.
Yeah, right? Just a quick little,
literally half the plays yesterday were like dinking and dunking to someone at
right on line of scrimmage.
Yeah, right on the line of scrimmage.
It's like a middle school offense.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
So I think even he'll be a great handcuff, if something even happens to Najee as well. I just expected more from Najee. 3 years in, he's averaging 3.9 yards per attempt. Not very good. That was a stat that I looked up earlier. And I think if he wants another contract, because I think it might expire by next year, or maybe it's the year after, but I think we definitely need to see Najee perform a little better if he wants a long-term contract with us. So that was a great point to mention about Jaylen Warren kind of overtaking some of those snaps from Harris. And my second player, he's a wide receiver. He's available in 31% of the leagues right now. I have Tutu Atwell. I don't know how impactful he will be once Cooper Kupp comes back. But right now he's sitting as a top 10 wide receiver points-wise throughout the first 2 weeks. And Matt Stafford seems to be that gunslinger that we saw about a year ago or two pre his injury last year. So Matt Stafford seems to be back into form, and that offense seems to be high-powered as well. So I'm looking at Tutu Atwell to maybe replace some of these other wide receivers that aren't meeting our expectations, such as Odell Beckham Jr., if you have him as a wide receiver 3 or flex. And kind of like Alex said earlier, DeAndre Hopkins isn't the player that we kind of knew he was anymore, it seems. So definitely looking at Tutu Atwell. And I guess I'll throw a third player in just because I'm shocked that he's still pretty relevant fantasy-wise. But Zach Ertz in Arizona, he's available in 47% of the leagues. And he's averaging 9 targets per game throughout the first 2 weeks, which is pretty decent. I mean, there's not a lot of fantasy relevancy with the Cardinals this year, but if you're looking for a tight end to... that could be one.
And I know damn well he's available in my league. So
JB's going to take just about anyone off the street at this point. We could get 1 fantasy point.
All right, so let's jump into the stock for some of these players this year. This is more like an outlook for the year rather than maybe for week 3, but there's already some players we mentioned that aren't meeting our expectations. So this is going to be about who you guys are in and out already for the year on. Alex, do you want to start with some players that you think their stock's going up for this year?
Yeah, I just have one that I actually really like based on how he's playing the first couple games is Sam Howell, quarterback, Washington. He's had 2 touchdowns in each game, 1 rush, 1 passing in the first game, 2 passing in the second game. He's got the Commanders. He got them undefeated right now. He's pretty mobile too. He's only had a couple rushes in each game, but he's averaging like 6.5 yards a carry. And he was always pretty mobile at UNC as well. I like how he's playing right now. He's got a big arm too for being kind of on a smaller side. He's like 6'1" or whatnot, but a couple of throws he was making against Denver, it was they were pretty darn good. So I actually like Sam Howell, his stock rising. I could even see potentially some fantasy owners having him as starting quarterback.
Alex, you would pick a UNC guy.
Of course I would.
Alex is a big
For all you
UNC
listeners
fan.
out there, I am a huge North Carolina Tar Heel fan through and through. I have no affiliation to them whatsoever. But if I ever bring up UNC, that is why.
He looks terrible in baby blue too.
And Jack hates that I like them for some reason.
It just doesn't make any sense. I just don't like anything you like. That's about it. I'll go for some stocks rising. I kind of mentioned James Cook earlier. He's my dog. He's obviously the lead back in Buffalo who had a bounce back game. Another guy I'm liking a lot is Darren Waller. The Giants are inconsistent. They're fun to watch, though. I mean, that comeback was insane. And in my opinion, if you watch the Giants play, I don't know why they're not throwing to Darren Waller every time. So he's my go-to tight end. So I got James Cook, Darren Waller. They're on the rise. I'm sorry I don't even know why I was about to apologize. I love Bash on the Bengals. But Joe Mixon, he's my RB2. Just anybody on the Bengals. It's just tough to trust anybody on that team, which I love to see personally. But for fantasy owner, not so much. Joe Mixon had 13 carries for less than 60 yards. He's up there in age. I know we don't like those older guys. But I don't know. I have a slight favoritism over older guys, more experienced guys, more veteran guys. But yeah, so we'll see what happens with Joe Mixon. Still like James Cook and Darren Waller moving forward. Those are my guys.
Well, for stock rising, I really wanted to mention Nick Chubb today because I know he was going to have a really good game against Pittsburgh, but I'm going to talk about him anymore. For stock rising, I say probably Baker Mayfield he's doing really good right now. I think he's had 2 passing touchdowns in both of his last games. He's looking really good, and the Bucs are 2-0. So They play the Eagles and one of the best defenses this upcoming week, so we'll see what happens there. But I think that Baker's got something to prove, and I think he's proven it. So that's what I got for stocks rising there. I think Baker's going to keep playing well for the rest of the year. Personally, I think he's learned how to take care of the ball a little bit better.
I know we're growing fantasy analysis, but I feel like we should call it. I'm going to take credit for Puka Nacua, however you say his name. Last week, that was a waiver wire pickup, and he showed up this week. I think we'll see if Cooper Kupp comes back. But I think the stock is also rising, and I had to throw that out there just to hype myself up.
Gold star for Jack.
Yeah, Puka's going off. Didn't he have like 15 targets last week or something like that?
Yeah, they were just only throwing the ball. They were only throwing the ball.
He's basically taking Kupp's place.
Yeah. And kind of going off of what JB and Alex were saying regarding stock up, Baker is sitting at QB 10 right now through the first 2 weeks, and Sam Howell's sitting at QB 11. So it's pretty interesting that two QBs that probably went undrafted in many leagues are, you could pick them up and just plug them into your offense already. And some of these well-known names, kind of like Joe Burrow, you probably drafted him maybe 4th round or maybe even the 3rd round, depending on what type of league you're in. And they are just not delivering fantasy-wise. So that kind of goes with one of my mindsets that I like to go into each year. I don't like to draft a QB that early. We kind of saw that last year with Geno Smith. He was undrafted, and then he ended up being a top 5 quarterback by the end of the year. So it's kind of interesting to see who rises to the occasion each year. And it kind of shows that you don't always need to take, a top 10 QB right off the bat. You could stock up with some of these other players. Speaking of stock up, one of my stock up players for this week is Tank Dell. I think his connection with CJ Stroud in Houston is going to be one to look at throughout this whole year. Right now, CJ Stroud is, I think, 4th in yards total, which is pretty impressive for a rookie coming out playing for a pretty bad team. So I think CJ Stroud is one to look at if you're looking at a waiver pickup. I think his stock will rise by the end of the year, and his connection with Tank Dell as well. I think he scored 20 points this week. A second player that I think their stock is going to skyrocket, we kind of mentioned them last week, is Zay Flowers. We saw that in week 2, OBJ is already suffering from another injury, which I feel like he gets paid to be injured. I don't like to bash. I don't like to bash football players because I can't be on that field because I'm very short. But I mean, you sign OBJ yet to his 5th or 6th team, and he's still getting injured 2 weeks into the season. So that tells me Zay Flowers will probably be wide receiver 1 in that offensive scheme, and I think his stock will skyrocket by the end of the year. Kind of going off of that, we have a couple of stock down players that I would like to talk about. JB, would you like to start off with this one?
Yeah, I'll start off with this one. I mean, I'm just gonna mention people that are on my team. The stock is obviously down. Chubb's probably out for the season, so his stock's down. I also have Waddle on my team, who hasn't been doing terrible, but he hasn't had nothing too crazy happen. So I honestly think it's going to continue to be like that. He's just going to have under 10 points at most of the games. He might have one game where he goes off, but I think Tyreek Hill is going to be the main focus there. So I think I might have messed up bringing him on my team. I know earlier in our earlier podcast, I was even saying I don't like picking wide receivers from teams that have 2 players, but then you got in my head, Dom, talking about Tyreek Hill's getting old. So I'm like, oh, you know what? Maybe Jalen Waddle is going to be it. And I just don't think that's going to be the case. So my backup wide receiver is OBJ, which what is even going on? So I gotta figure out that. But yeah, I don't think Jalen Waddle is gonna do much more. So.
Yeah, for me, I feel like we've been talking a lot of running backs today. I know I mentioned Joe Mixon. A big guy that I was targeting in my drafts, just kind of a late Vikings running back, Alexander Madison. I was pretty hyped for him because after Alex's boy Dalvin Cook left, I don't know if it was the long hair, but I don't know if I was expecting the same result. But I think his stock is kind of plummeting. Not a good week this week. I think he's averaging like maybe 11 points a game after 2 weeks. Is tough to tell. But he's a guy that I was pretty high on. So it's kind of a bummer to see him falling. The Vikings are obviously a heavy pass offense. So he's not getting as many looks as I predicted, but I can be wrong at least once.
You probably be wrong. All right. Well, my stock down, I got a tight end and a wide receiver. Wide receiver wise, I'm going to go with the Baltimore Ravens, Rashad Bateman. He came in even with OBJ, and he was on the depth chart as wide receiver 2 for them. And so far, he's averaging 3 catches and 25 yards a game right now, and it's just not looking pretty. And he was even regressing last year. So I know he was usually kind of like a late pickup, maybe a flex, or maybe a first off the bench, but it's looking kind of ugly right now. And I don't have faith. I never have faith in the Baltimore Ravens, just as a Steeler fan, but also just Lamar Jackson in the passing game. Even though he's gone off to a decent start, I don't trust him in the passing game whatsoever. So I'm kind of low on Bateman. And then a bigger name, I'm kind of down on George Kittle. He hasn't eclipsed 10 fantasy points yet this year. And this offense is really starting to become McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel centric. And it seems like, based on like play selection, that Kittle is more of a blocking tight end right now and not getting quite as many targets. So I honestly feel like as long as McCaffrey stays healthy, Kittle's stock's going to stay down because it's going to be so focused around him.
That team is so overpowered. Oh my God.
They're so good.
And did you guys know that they have the most cap space right now? They have like $45 million in cap space. They could go sign like the top free agent and like be even better, which is it's crazy like how they're pulling that off.
Yeah,
it's the beauty of having Mr. Irrelevant as your quarterback.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just plug in a random guy off the street, and I'm just kidding.
Yeah, have Dom go play for the Niners.
Only in my dreams, JB. Only in my dreams. I'm stuck passing the ball to my little brothers in the backyard. So,
I bet you're a gunslinger, Dom. I can see.
I am. Back in high school.
You got the flow for it too. You got that Trevor Lawrence there.
Thank you. One of my stock down players for this week and for the rest of the year, I'm looking at Bryce Hall. I mean, he had a pretty decent year last year. I think a lot of people were still thinking he'd fill in that RB1 role for the Jets, even though they signed Dalvin Cook. I think he has like 5 points in each of his games so far this year. I think maybe last week it was 8. But he is not doing very well if you drafted him to be, your running back 1 or running back 2. So I'm definitely down on Breece Hall, especially because I think that offense is going to have to catch up a lot in games. So they're going to have to be passing the ball. And you can't really rely, on a workhorse running back unless you have someone like Christian McCaffrey on your team, to kind of break away. And I don't think Breece Hall will ascend to what we thought he would be this year. And another one of my players that my stock is following for the year, we kind of mentioned him earlier, is Najee. He only had 9 attempts yesterday. So it kind of shows the lack of confidence in him being that workhorse running back that we kind of need right now. So those are 2 of my guys that I'm down on their stock.
And I think Najee's is going to stay down too. I agree with that, Tom. I really don't see it getting much better for him over there.
I've lost all hope in him.
Yeah. I don't know if it's because of our offensive line, if it's that bad, or if it's just like he's just not performing to what everyone thought he would be.
Slow.
Yeah, he's slow.
Freaking slow.
Like you see him hit the hole compared to Jaylen Warren, and it's just like, or any other running back really. Like it's just not as fast. He's big. I mean, like harder to take down, and he's got that muscle and that power, but he's not as fast. And a lot of these offensives nowadays are just based on speed. You got to be fast in today's league. So
yeah, he'll probably be good at the goal line, but it's yet to see if the Steelers could get there this year. We're stuck in our own territory usually. Heading into next week for week 3, do you have any starts that you guys want to kind of mention? Any predictions that they're going to take off for week 3? They could win your week.
Yeah, I got Gabe Davis out of Buffalo. Right now, they're playing Washington. Washington is 25th worst defense against fantasy wide receivers. And just the fact Gabe Davis is wide receiver 2 and Stephon Diggs gets most of the attention. I think he'll have a big game. He's projected in many of the major fantasy outlets. He's projected like 11 or 12 points, so he may not be a bad flex or wide receiver 3 for your fantasy team.
For me, I'm hoping for, we mentioned him before, but A.J. Brown, I'm hoping to have it back, or a, week back. Playing well. They're playing against the Buccaneers. Don't know much about their defense, but pretty sure it's going to be a run and gun type of game. So I think A.J. Brown has a bounce back game. It was cool to watch the Eagles. Devontae Smith they're both. Watching them on the sidelines was so funny. Even though they were up winning, like Alex, you mentioned, he was still just complaining. Like Alex used to complain in the backyard. But yeah, I think A.J. Brown is definitely my go-to guy this week. Hoping for that he bounces back.
Yeah, I don't mean to steal Jack's team, but I got Jalen Hurts, and I was thinking the same thing. Not a bounce back because he did good last week, but I think he does even better this upcoming week. I just don't think the Bucs defense is going to be able to handle their offense, and it seemed like their OC was getting better at the play calling the second week compared to the first week. So I really do think it's going to be a bad game for the Buccaneers, and I think it might be one of those games to where towards the end they might start running it a little bit, which might hurt Jalen Hurts. But I think that at the beginning it's going to be Jalen Hurts just throwing the ball around, having a good old jolly time, getting me a bunch of fantasy points. So
like that good old jolly time. Never thought I'd hear that for an NFL game.
It's not Christmas yet, guys. Come on. But let's hop into our trade talks. Have you guys been targeting any players in your leagues? You're kind of checking out to see maybe some other guys are down on some players, so you want to jump in and try to trade for them?
Yeah, actually, for running back.
Yeah, so actually, one that I'm kind of looking at that it's plausible because he's actually not doing well right now, but I feel like he has the potential to have a breakout season. Is Dameon Pierce, running back out of Houston? He's doing absolutely terrible right now, but the fact that I feel like Houston's going to realize that they can't throw 40-plus times a game with Stroud every single game, and they got to get the run game going more with Pierce. So I feel like that's going to be more plausible if I can get him from the fantasy owner who has him, because they're probably real down on him right now. So I'm hoping that could be a good pickup right now.
I think for me, one guy I'm targeting is Chris Olave with the Saints. He didn't have the best performance this past week, but I think he's still their number one receiver. They were throwing a lot to Michael Thomas. A lot of teams are being wary of him nowadays, which I think just opens up Olave for more pass catches. Derek Carr hasn't been playing as well they've got their run game going, and that defense is definitely giving them the ball as much as they need it. So Chris Olave is my target for trades.
I wouldn't say I have a target for trade personally, just because I'm in this 6-person league and a lot of people are available on the waiver wire. To be honest with you, if anything, I'd be looking at a tight end maybe, but I just know that nobody's going to want to give up their tight end for the players that I have. So at most, I could maybe trade Waddle, but everybody has really good players right now. So I don't think I'm looking into trading.
Yeah, I have 2 guys on my list. I think a lot of people are out on them, so I'm kind of taking a gamble on them. My first player is Alvin Kamara. He's coming back after next week, so he only got suspended 3 weeks. And the Saints are really anemic on the running game right now. I think Taysom Hill is their lead rushing guy, and he's not even a running back. So I think Alvin Kamara,
Army knife.
Right? He is a Swiss Army knife, but I think Alvin Kamara is going to come back into that role and catch a lot of Derek Carr's kind of dink and dunk passes. So I could see Alvin Kamara maybe getting 5 or 6 targets a game. And I still think he's explosive in the passing game. And I think they're really looking for an offensive boost. They haven't scored a lot of points in their games so far. So if you're willing to take the risk, I think Alvin Kamara could be good for at least 1 more year. He'll probably get cut next year just because I looked up. The Saints are -60 in cap space next year. That's the worst in the NFL.
Yes.
So I think it's definitely win now mode for the Saints.
That is so bad.
Yeah, -$60 million. That's crazy. And my second guy, a lot of people are also down on him, but I'm not so sure that he'll even be on this team because there might be a lot of real-life trade talks between him still. But Jonathan Taylor, I think he's looking for a big contract next year. And in order to do that, he's going to have to play this year and ball out just because a lot of people are already out on him because of his injury history. So I think if he wants to stay relevant in the NFL, whenever he does come back, I think he has to go off. And I assume he wants to stay in the NFL just because he put up pretty good numbers when he's playing. So those are 2 running backs that I would trade for if, I have a running back who's injured on my team or anything like that. Kind of hopping into our last topic, we have the fantasy game of the week for week 3. So I want to hear your predictions. They could be brief, but what game are you having an eye on? You think players on both teams are just going to go off and they could be fantasy relevant for week 3?
I think my game is the Chargers at Minnesota. There's just, as far as both quarterbacks, Herbert and Cousins, they both can put up big fantasy numbers. The wide receiver talent on both sides is unbelievable. I feel like that's where the strong suit is there, the quarterback and wide receiver play. I wouldn't play either of their defenses. I feel like this could be like both teams scoring 25 plus points. Even though Eckler's out right now, I would expect then a little bit more production even from Herbert and the wide receivers. So that's kind of my game to watch. I feel like that's going to be a big shootout.
Yeah, I feel the same about the Rams and Bengals game. To be honest with you, I think Stafford's going to do really well. I mean, like the Bengals haven't been looking the best from a defensive standpoint, and I think Burrow maybe might I guess Burrow might not play, huh? Well, if Burrow plays, that's the game. That's the game that I got my eye
on. For me, I think I got Denver and Miami. I think Denver, Russ kind of showed that he still has it in him to throw the deep ball. We know Miami. They got 2 great receivers. They got Tua, who's balling out this year. I think similar to some other games, there's going to be a lot of scoring points on each side. We'll see if the Denver Broncos defense can keep up with the Miami offense.
Yeah, I like all of your picks. I actually have both of those games written down. I think Sean Payton has a lot of pressure, and I don't think there's any way that they go 0-3 just because Sean Payton, Russell Wilson. And I think that's probably going to be the shock of the week when the Broncos win. I don't think the Dolphins' defense is that good, so I think the Broncos have a fighting chance. But, every week there's some upsets. You don't expect a team to beat the other team. But the game of the week, it might be like 60 points total, even more. It's the Chargers versus Vikings. I'm not saying they're each going to score 60. I'm saying like the total overall. But that's going to be a shootout. I don't think either team wants to go 0-3. And I just think that both sides of the ball are just going to explode on fantasy football next week. But before we wrap up this show, we have some comments here. So I wanted to kind of mention one of them. We have one of our listeners, Daniel. Shout out to Daniel listening to us. His comment was, "Where are my guys? Were they fired?" The answer is no. This is a new show. Your guys, I think, were on yesterday, but thank you for listening in today. We are a new show. We're called Fantasy Alpha. We're going to be on every Tuesday at 8 p.m. So if you like what you heard tonight, please join us again for next week. I just thought that was funny. I saw that right now, but had to shout out our
Daniel.
Shout out Daniel.
Thanks, Daniel. Woo! But yeah, I guess, do you guys have anything else you wanted to mention before we, hop off here?
I need a running back, guys.
Yeah.
Alex, just trade me, dude. Justin Herbert for
No, I'm never trading with you. You're just gonna try to screw me over.
Yeah, man. That's how trades work in fantasy football. But good luck to everybody in fantasy week.
Ooh. There's some whammy bar in there.
Good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Good night.
Thanks again for joining, everyone. We'll talk next week.